The most heartwarming dog stories in history. Part 1. The Loyal Ones. Dogs who waited forever. Throughout history, there have been countless stories of loyalty, courage, and unconditional love between dogs and their humans. But some stories stand above the rest, legendary tales that prove a dog's devotion knows no bounds. In this series, we will explore the most heartwarming and awe-inspiring dog stories ever recorded. Some of these dogs waited for their owners for years. Some saved entire towns, and some remained loyal even beyond death. Today, in Part 1, we begin with the dogs who waited through storms, through time, and even beyond the grave. Because for some dogs, love never fades. Hachiko, the dog that waited for 9 years. If there is one story that defines unwavering loyalty, it is the story of Hachiko. Hachiko was an Akita dog from Japan, born in 1923. As a puppy, he was adopted by Professor Hachiko Ueno, a university professor in Tokyo. From the very beginning, their bond was unbreakable. Every morning, Hachiko would accompany the professor to the Shibuya train station, watching as he boarded the train for work. And every evening, at exactly the same time, Hachiko would return to the station to wait for his master to come home. It became their daily routine, one built on trust, love, and unspoken understanding. But then, one day, Professor Ueno never came back. The day that changed everything. On May 21st, 1925, as usual, Hachiko walked with his master to the train station. The professor patted his head and whispered his usual goodbye, "I'll be back soon." But that day, tragedy struck. Professor Ueno suffered a fatal brain hemorrhage at work and passed away suddenly. He never returned to Shibuya Station, and Hachiko never knew why. A lifetime of waiting. That evening, Hachiko returned to the station at his usual time, sitting in his usual spot, waiting for the familiar face to appear. But his master was nowhere to be found. Hours passed. Days turned into weeks. Weeks became months. And yet, Hachiko never stopped waiting. For 9 years, Hachiko returned to the station every single day. Rain or shine, snow or heat, he sat at the same spot, watching, waiting, hoping. The local station workers noticed him. Passers-by began to recognize him. He became a symbol of devotion, a testament to a love that refused to die. People began bringing him food, blankets, and water, touched by his unwavering loyalty. Hachiko did not care that his owner would never return. All he knew was that his place was there, waiting, and he would wait forever if he had to. The world learns his story. In 1932, a newspaper article was published about the dog who never stopped waiting. It captured the hearts of the entire nation. People from all over Japan traveled to Shibuya Station just to see him, to sit beside him, to feed him, and to honor his devotion. He became a symbol of loyalty and faithfulness, a reminder that love is not measured in time, but in unwavering presence. Even after nearly a decade, Hachiko continued his daily routine, until one fateful day, the final goodbye. On March 8, 1935, Hachiko was found lying in his usual spot near the train station. But this time, he never stood up again. Hachiko had passed away after waiting for 9 long years. His death shook the nation. People mourned him as they would a beloved family member. Thousands attended his funeral, and he was buried beside his master, finally reunited after nearly a decade apart. His story lives on today. A bronze statue of Hachiko now stands in Shibuya Station, marking the exact spot where he waited. Every year, people gather on March 8th to honor him, celebrating Hachiko Day. His body is preserved in Japan's National Science Museum. Even now, nearly a century later, Hachiko remains the ultimate symbol of loyalty. Because some love, it never dies. Capitan, the dog who slept by his owner's grave for 10 years. If you thought Hachiko's story was remarkable, wait until you hear about Capitan. While Hachiko waited for his master, Capitan refused to leave his master's side, even after death. This is the story of a dog who chose to live in a cemetery for a decade. Because for him, love wasn't about presence. It was about never letting go. A loyal companion. In 2005, Capitan, a black and white German shepherd, was adopted by Miguel Guzman, a man from Argentina. From the moment they met, Miguel and Capitan were inseparable. They spent their days walking together, sitting in the park, and simply enjoying each other's company. But then, tragedy struck. Miguel passed away unexpectedly in 2006. His family buried him in a cemetery in Villa Carlos Paz, Argentina. After the funeral, something strange happened. Capitan vanished. The family searched everywhere. They assumed he had run away in grief. But then, a few weeks later, they found him, and what they saw brought them to tears. A grave that became a home. Capitan was lying beside Miguel's grave, his eyes full of sadness, his body curled up against the cold stone. No one knew how he had found the cemetery. It was miles away from the house. No one had taken him there. But somehow, he knew. And from that moment on, he refused to leave. Every night, Capitan slept beside Miguel's tombstone. Through scorching summers and freezing winters, he stayed. He never left the cemetery, not even when Miguel's family tried to bring him home. He belongs here, the cemetery caretaker said. He walks around during the day, but every evening, like clockwork, he returns to sleep beside his owner. For 10 years, Capitan lived among the graves, never leaving, never forgetting. A goodbye that never came. In 2018, Capitan passed away, right beside Miguel's grave. The cemetery workers buried him next to the man he loved, ensuring that even in death, they would never be apart. A statue was built in his honor. His story spread worldwide, a symbol of love that defied even death. Because some dogs, they don't say goodbye. They simply stay. Love that defies time. Hachiko, Capitan. 2 dogs, 2 different countries, but one message. Love doesn't end when life does. These stories remind us of the purest form of devotion, a love so deep that even death cannot erase it. Because dogs don't see time, they only see love. And for them, that is enough. Part 2. The Saviors, dogs who became heroes. Some dogs wait, some dogs protect, and some save entire towns. In Part 1, we saw the unwavering loyalty of Hachiko and Capitan, who proved that love never fades, even beyond death. Now, in Part 2, we focus on dogs who went beyond loyalty, dogs who became legends for their courage, determination, and life-saving actions. And there is no greater story of heroism than Balto, the sled dog that saved an entire town. Balto, the sled dog that saved Nome, Alaska. The year was 1925. Nome, a small town in Alaska, was facing a disaster that could wipe out its entire population. A deadly outbreak of diphtheria, a highly contagious bacterial infection, was spreading through the town's children. Without medicine, dozens would die, and soon, the entire town could be lost. There was only one cure, a life-saving serum. But there was one problem. The nearest supply of the serum was over 600 miles away, in Anchorage. And with blizzards, sub-zero temperatures, and no working airplanes, it seemed impossible to get it in time. But then, they came up with a daring plan, one that would rely on the strength, speed, and bravery of sled dogs. And at the heart of it all, a black Siberian husky named Balto, the great race of mercy. The plan was simple, but incredibly dangerous. A relay of 20 mushers and 150 sled dogs would take turns racing across 600 miles of frozen land, carrying the serum to Nome before it was too late. One by one, each team pushed through snowstorms, freezing winds, and exhaustion, handing the serum off like a baton in a race against death. And the final stretch? It belonged to Balto and his team. Balto's impossible journey. The last team of dogs, led by Gunnar Kazan, was supposed to pass the serum to another sled team for the final miles. But as Kazan reached the next checkpoint, he found the other team's musher asleep, exhausted from the brutal journey. Waking him would waste precious time, and the storm was getting worse by the minute. So Kazan made a bold decision. Instead of waiting, he and Balto would finish the journey alone. It was a suicide mission. Blinding snow, howling winds, temperatures as low as minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit, minus 40 degrees Celsius. Yet Balto ran. mile after mile, through the blizzard, through the darkness. The sled tipped over multiple times. Kazan's hands were frozen stiff. The serum almost fell into the snow. And at one point, Kazan couldn't even see the trail anymore. But Balto never stopped. He trusted his instincts, leading his team through the blizzard, finding the way when his human couldn't. And finally, after running 53 miles in total darkness, Balto reached Nome, the moment that saved a town. The exhausted team collapsed at the town's entrance. But in their sled, the serum was safe. Within hours, doctors began administering the medicine to sick children. And within days, the epidemic was stopped. Balto had saved an entire town. The world hears his story. News of Balto's incredible journey spread across the world. He became an instant hero, honored with a parade in New York City. A bronze statue of Balto was built in Central Park, where it still stands today. He was featured in newspapers, books, and even an animated movie. But Balto himself? He never understood that he was famous. He was just a dog who did his job, a dog who never gave up, a dog who ran into the storm to save the ones who needed him. And because of him, an entire town survived. Other heroic sled dogs, the forgotten ones. Though Balto became the face of the great race of mercy, there was another dog, one whose contribution was equally legendary. His name was Togo. While Balto ran 53 miles, Togo and his team ran over 260 miles through the worst part of the storm. Without Togo, the serum would have never made it far enough for Balto to finish the final stretch. And yet, for decades, his story was forgotten. Until recent years, when historians uncovered his heroic journey. In 2019, Disney Plus released the movie Togo, finally telling his story to the world. Togo is now recognized as the greatest sled dog of all time, honored alongside Balto, because in the end, it wasn't just one dog who saved Nome. It was a team of heroes, led by the bravest hearts in the coldest storm. Other life-saving dogs in history, Balto and Togo weren't the only dogs who risked their lives to save others. Here are more incredible real-life dog heroes. Barry the St. Bernard, early 1800s, saved 40 people from avalanches in the Swiss Alps. Swansea Jack, 1930s, UK, a Labrador retriever who rescued 27 drowning people from a river. Apollo the Search Dog, 9/11, USA, one of the first search and rescue dogs to arrive at Ground Zero. Frida the Mexican Navy Dog, 2017, saved dozens of people after an earthquake in Mexico. Some dogs wait for their owners. Some dogs love them until the end. And some run into danger, without hesitation, without fear, because their love is stronger than their own survival. The legacy of heroic dogs. From ancient times to modern history, dogs have been our protectors, rescuers, and silent heroes. They don't do it for fame. They don't do it for reward. They do it because they love us. And that love is the purest thing in this world. Part 3. The soldiers, dogs who went to war. Some dogs wait. Some dogs save lives. And some go to war. Throughout history, dogs have stood beside soldiers on battlefields, risking their lives not because they were trained to, but because they refused to leave the ones they loved. In Part 1, we saw dogs like Hachiko and Capitan, who proved that love never fades. In Part 2, we honored Balto and Togo, the sled dogs who saved an entire town from an epidemic. Now, in Part 3, we tell the stories of the war dogs, the brave canines who fought, protected, and even saved soldiers on the battlefield. Because for some dogs, loyalty is stronger than fear. Stubby, the most decorated dog of World War I. He was just a stray. No one expected him to become a war hero. But Stubby, a small, mixed-breed dog, did something that no other dog had done before. He served in battle, saved lives, and became the most decorated war dog in history. How a stray dog became a soldier. Stubby was found wandering near Yale University in 1917. At the time, the U.S. Army was training soldiers for World War I. One young soldier, Private John Robert Conroy, saw the little dog and decided to take him in. Stubby quickly became the mascot of the training camp. Learning to march alongside the soldiers and even saluting with his paw. When Conroy's unit was deployed to France, the soldiers smuggled Stubby onto the ship. He was not just a mascot anymore. He was going to war. Stubby on the battlefield. For 18 months, Stubby served on the front lines in France. He became more than just a companion. He became a soldier. He warned soldiers of gas attacks. Stubby could detect poison gas before the soldiers could. He would bark and wake them up, saving countless lives. He found wounded soldiers. Stubby would run through trenches, finding injured men and staying with them until medics arrived. He caught a German spy one night. Stubby attacked a German soldier who was sneaking into American trenches. He bit the enemy and held on until U.S. troops captured him. For his bravery, Stubby was promoted to Sergeant Stubby, the only dog in history to hold an official military rank, returning a hero. When the war ended, Stubby returned to the U.S. as a national hero. He met 3 U.S. presidents, Wilson, Harding, and Coolidge. He was given a medal from General Pershing, the highest-ranking officer in the U.S. Army. He became the official mascot of Georgetown University's football team. Stubby spent the rest of his life loved, honored, and remembered. Today, his story is still told as a reminder that heroes come in all sizes. Even the smallest stray dog can change history. Smokey, the tiny dog that saved 250 soldiers. She was only 4 pounds. She didn't look like a warrior. But Smokey, a tiny Yorkshire Terrier, became one of the most legendary war dogs of World War II. From abandoned puppy to war hero, Smokey was found abandoned in a foxhole in New Guinea in 1944. No one knew where she came from. But one thing was certain: she was no ordinary dog. A U.S. soldier named Corporal William Wynne adopted her, and she immediately became part of the unit. She comforted soldiers. Smokey would sit on the laps of injured soldiers, boosting their morale during wartime. She performed tricks to cheer up troops. She could walk on a tightrope, play dead, and even salute. But her greatest act of heroism came one day when soldiers needed to lay communication wires under a dangerous airfield. The problem? They had to crawl through a 70-foot-long pipe filled with debris. If soldiers did it, they could get trapped or shot. So instead, they turned to Smokey. With a string tied to her collar, the tiny dog crawled through the pipe, dragging the wire behind her. She saved over 250 soldiers that day without a single scratch. A legend in history. After the war, Smokey became one of the first therapy dogs, visiting hospitals and comforting veterans. She received 8 battle stars for her service. She was featured in newspapers, magazines, and even TV shows. A bronze statue of her stands in Cleveland, Ohio. She may have been small, but her heart? It was as big as any hero. Other dogs who served in war. Cairo, the Navy SEAL dog who helped take down Osama bin Laden. Chips, a German shepherd who attacked enemy soldiers and won a Silver Star. Luca, a bomb-sniffing dog who saved thousands of lives in Iraq. Gander, a Newfoundland dog who saved Canadian soldiers by grabbing a live grenade and carrying it away before it exploded. Some soldiers carry weapons. Some soldiers wear uniforms. And some soldiers? They have 4 legs, wagging tails, and hearts full of courage. The dogs that never left the battlefield. Not all war dogs made it home. Many of them stayed behind, fighting alongside their soldiers until the very end. In Vietnam alone, over 4,000 war dogs served. But when the war ended, they were classified as equipment and left behind. Dogface, only 200 made it back to the U.S. Dogface, the rest, left to die. For decades, war dogs were forgotten, their sacrifices unrecognized. Until 2000, when the U.S. military finally honored them, allowing war dogs to come home and be adopted after their service. Today, the National War Dog Memorial stands in honor of those who gave everything and never came back. Because a soldier's loyalty isn't measured in medals. It's measured in the love, courage, and sacrifice they give, no matter the cost. War dogs, the unseen heroes. They didn't ask to go to war. They didn't understand the battles. But they stood beside their humans anyway. And that makes them heroes. Because some dogs don't just wait. Some dogs run into fire, face bullets, and walk through war zones, not because they have to, but because they choose to. Part 4. The Dogs Who Changed the World. Some dogs waited forever, Hachiko, Capitan. Some dogs saved entire towns, Balto, Togo. Some dogs braved the battlefield, Stubby, Smokey, Cairo. But today, we explore a different kind of hero, dogs who changed the world not through war or survival, but through intelligence, companionship, and their remarkable abilities. These dogs left a lasting mark on history, proving that dogs aren't just man's best friend, they're pioneers, explorers, and even scientists. Let's meet the dogs who transformed medicine, inspired nations, and even traveled beyond Earth. Laika, the first animal in space. On November 3, 1957, the world witnessed one of the most extraordinary moments in history. A living being left Earth's atmosphere for the very first time. But it wasn't a human. It was a stray dog from Moscow. Her name was Laika, and she was about to become the first astronaut of her kind. From the streets to the stars, Laika was just a stray, roaming the streets of Soviet Russia. No one knew her age, her past, or her story. But one day, Soviet scientists chose her for an experiment that would change history. At the height of the Cold War, the Soviet Union wanted to prove it could send a living creature into space. They needed a small, resilient, and calm animal, and Laika was perfect. She was trained for months, enduring extreme temperatures, small, confined spaces, zero-gravity simulations. And on November 3, 1957, Laika was launched aboard Sputnik 2, becoming the first living being to orbit Earth. A hero's legacy. Laika never returned. At the time, technology did not exist to bring her back safely. She passed away a few hours into the mission due to overheating. But her legacy lived on. Laika paved the way for human space travel. Because of her, scientists learned how to keep astronauts safe in space. She became a symbol of courage, sacrifice, and exploration. Today, Laika is honored with statues, books, and films, reminding the world that before humans touched the stars, a small dog led the way. Because sometimes, heroes come in the most unexpected forms. Barry, the Saint Bernard who saved over 40 lives. Before rescue helicopters, before GPS, before modern emergency services, there was Barry, a Saint Bernard who saved more than 40 people from avalanches in the Swiss Alps. His story dates back to the early 1800s, when monks at the Great St. Bernard Hospice in Switzerland trained dogs to help lost travelers in the snow-covered mountains. Barry became the most legendary rescue dog of all time. The most famous rescue. One winter night, Barry was searching the mountains when he found a small boy trapped under thick snow. Instead of waiting for humans to arrive, Barry took matters into his own paws. He dug through the snow until he could reach the child, licked the boy's face to keep him conscious, lay beside him, warming him with his body heat. Then, Barry lifted the boy onto his back and carried him to safety. A dog carrying a human through the mountains, a feat of pure strength and devotion. Barry's legend spread across Europe, and he became a symbol of heroism and rescue. Pushpin today. Swiss mountain rescue dogs are still called Barry dogs in his honor. Pushpin, a statue of Barry, stands in Paris, reminding the world of his incredible legacy. Because long before humans built technology for rescue operations, dogs like Barry were already saving lives. Rin Tin Tin, the dog that became a Hollywood star. Not all dogs change the world through rescue. Some dogs change it through inspiration. One such dog was Rin Tin Tin, a German shepherd who went from a war-torn battlefield to the silver screen, capturing the hearts of millions. The war dog that became a star. Rin Tin Tin's story began in 1918. During World War I, an American soldier, Lee Duncan, found a starving German shepherd puppy in a bombed-out kennel in France. Instead of leaving him behind, Duncan took him home to America. Little did he know, this dog would change Hollywood forever. Rin Tin Tin was incredibly intelligent. He learned complex tricks, stunts, and even emotions. He was discovered by a filmmaker and cast in silent movies. Soon, he became one of the biggest movie stars of the 1920s. He starred in 27 films, saved Warner Brothers Studios from bankruptcy, and even received the most votes for the first Academy Award for Best Actor, though they refused to give it to a dog. His films inspired generations of dog lovers and paved the way for future animal actors. The Hollywood Walk of Fame has a star for Rin Tin Tin. His bloodline continues today, with descendants still trained as service and military dogs. Because sometimes, heroes don't just fight or save lives. Sometimes, heroes inspire millions just by being themselves. Indal, the most intelligent service dog in history. Among all service dogs, one stands above the rest, Indal, the Labrador Retriever. He wasn't just a service dog. He was a pioneer in disability assistance, capable of over 100 commands. And his story changed the way the world viewed service animals. The ultimate service dog. Indal was paired with Alan Parton, a British Navy veteran who had suffered severe injuries, leaving him unable to walk properly. Indal's abilities were unbelievable. He could open doors, operate lights, and retrieve objects. He learned to use ATM machines and vending machines. He could even put Parton in the recovery position if he collapsed. But one day, Indal's skills were put to the ultimate test. The day he saved his owner's life. One day, Alan fell out of his wheelchair in the middle of a busy street. Indal immediately took action. He positioned Alan's body safely to prevent injury, dragged him to the sidewalk to avoid traffic, barked for help until someone arrived. His quick actions saved Alan's life. Indal became a global ambassador for service dogs. He won multiple awards and became a symbol of independence for disabled individuals. Because of Indal, the world saw just how intelligent, compassionate, and capable service dogs could be. And because of dogs like him, millions of lives have been transformed. The dogs who changed the world, not through war, but through love. Not all heroes fight. Not all heroes rescue. Some heroes explore the stars. Some heroes save travelers in the mountains. Some heroes inspire generations through the big screen. Some heroes change the lives of the disabled forever. Because in the end, dogs don't need to understand history to change it. They just need to be exactly who they are. Part 5. The dogs who never left their humans, even in the darkest moments. Some dogs waited for their owners, Hachiko, Capitan. Some dogs saved entire towns, Balto, Togo. Some dogs went to war, Stubby, Smokey, Cairo. Some dogs changed the world, Laika, Barry, Rin Tin Tin, Indal. But today, we honor the dogs who refuse to leave their humans, no matter what. These dogs did not save cities. They did not fight battles. They did not become famous. But their loyalty never wavered, even when their humans were sick, suffering, or gone. Because for these dogs, love wasn't about where they were. It was about who they were with. And no matter what happened, they stayed. Greyfriars Bobby, the dog that guarded his owner's grave for 14 years. In 1858, a Scottish man named John Grey passed away. He was buried in Greyfriars Kirkyard, a historic cemetery in Edinburgh. His funeral was small. His life was quiet. But what happened next would make him unforgettable. The dog who never left the grave. John Grey had a Skye Terrier named Bobby. After his owner's burial, Bobby refused to leave the cemetery. For 14 years, he slept on his owner's grave through snow, rain, and storms, refused to be taken home by kind strangers, survived only on food from locals who admired his devotion. He became a legend in Edinburgh, a symbol of unbreakable loyalty. Even when officials tried to remove him, the city's people fought to protect him, giving him a special collar and the freedom to stay in the cemetery. A statue of Bobby now stands in Edinburgh, honoring his story. His grave became a tourist attraction, visited by people who still leave flowers for him. Because some dogs, they refused to say goodbye. Fido, the dog who waited at the train station for 14 years. Just like Hachiko, another dog on the other side of the world was waiting. His name was Fido, and his story happened in Italy during World War II. The day his owner never came home. Fido was a stray dog who had been rescued by Carlo Soriani, a factory worker. Every day, Fido walked with Carlo to the train station, where he took the train to work. And every evening, Fido waited at the station for Carlo to return. It was their routine. Until one tragic day in 1943, when a bombing attack struck Carlo's factory. He never came home. A lifetime of waiting. But Fido? He didn't understand war. All he knew was that his human had left on a train, and he was supposed to come back. So Fido continued to wait, every day, at the same time, at the same place, for 14 years. His story spread throughout Italy, making him a symbol of undying loyalty. The town built a statue of Fido, honoring his devotion. He waited until the day he died, because for him, Carlo would always come back. Shep, the dog who watched his owner's coffin leave and never left the train station again. Some dogs wait at train stations for their owners to return. But Shep's story was different. He watched his owner leave forever, and then spent the rest of his life waiting for him to come back. A goodbye that never ended. In 1936, in Fort Benton, Montana, an old shepherd fell ill and passed away. His loyal dog, Shep, watched as his owner's coffin was placed on a train, heading east for burial. From that moment on, Shep refused to leave the train station. Every time a train arrived, he ran to greet passengers, hoping to see his owner. Through bitter winters and scorching summers, he never left. Station workers fed and cared for him, knowing he would never stop waiting. For 6 years, Shep greeted every train, until one tragic day in 1942, when he slipped on the icy tracks and was hit by a train. A legacy that lives on. A statue of Shep was placed at the train station, honoring his devotion. His collar, his memory, and his story are preserved in Montana's museums. Even decades later, people visit his grave, touched by his story, because some dogs don't understand death. All they know is love. And for them, love never leaves. The dogs who stayed through illness and hardship. Not all stories are about waiting for the dead. Some dogs stayed even when their owners needed them the most, in sickness, in pain, in their final moments. Oscar the therapy dog, a dog who could predict when hospice patients were about to pass away, staying with them so they would never die alone. Hawkeye the Labrador, a dog who lay beside the coffin of his Navy SEAL owner, refusing to leave during the funeral. Sissy the miniature schnauzer, a small dog who walked 20 miles alone to find her owner in the hospital, just to be by her side. Dogs don't just love us in life. They stay with us through the hardest moments, reminding us that no matter what, we are never truly alone. The dogs who never left, the true definition of loyalty. These dogs didn't chase fame. They didn't fight wars. They didn't save lives in grand, heroic gestures. But what they did was just as powerful. They stayed, even when their owners left, even when years passed, even when the world told them to move on. Because for a dog, love is not about time. It is not about place. It is simply about being there. And that is the purest kind of love. What these stories teach us. A dog's love does not fade. A dog's loyalty does not break. A dog's heart does not understand goodbye. We, as humans, struggle to hold on to love. We let time, distance, and pain make us forget. But dogs? They never forget. And because of them, neither will we. The end. But their love lives on. This is the final chapter of our journey through the greatest dog stories in history. Hachiko, who waited for 9 years. Balto, who saved a town. Stubby, who fought in war. Laika, who touched the stars. Shep, who never left the train station. Each one different, each one special, but all proving one thing. Dogs are not just pets. They are family. They are history. And above all else, they are love. Thank you for reading this series. Do you have a dog story of loyalty, love, or devotion? Share it in the comments. If you love this series, don't forget to subscribe for more amazing animal stories. Because some stories deserve to be told forever. These dogs have proven that love has no limits. They've waited, fought, saved, and even traveled beyond Earth, all for the ones they love. If this video touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to Dog Discoveries with Florence for more incredible animal stories. And if you have your own heartwarming dog story, share it in the comments below.